Hello everyone. The last time we were together, we spoke about the fact that if laining may be a communal obligation, not your personal one, Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum, reading each pasuk of that week's Parsha twice with a translation, is a personal obligation. And one of the avid listeners of our podcast said, well, it may be a personal obligation, but with due respect, I can do it whenever I want. So therefore, the last time we were together, we spoke about the 7 points of view that says, what is the cutoff point for Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum? Before they made it into the Shulchan Aruch, not bad for a day's work. He says, point of view number 1, Mitzvah min HaMuvchar is to finish the Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum before you eat the Shabbos meal. Number 2, if you didn't do it before you ate the Shabbos meal, then after lunch. Number 3, you have until the last time you can make Havdalah for that past Shabbos, namely till Tuesday. And finally, if you didn't make it, up to Shmini Atzeret, as the Ramah explains, the Hainu b'Simchas Torah, Shas Mashlimim Atzibor. So in Israel, that would be Shmini Atzeret, and Chutz La'aretz, it would be the day after Shmini Atzeret. When the congregation finishes the Torah, that's the last possible time. But indeed, in Masechet Brachot, Avchet Amud Bet, Rav Bibi Bar Abaye says that he wanted to read it early, and some old man said to him, you can't do it earlier, you can't do it later, but rather ashlimi parshti taichu im hatzibur Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. You have to go ahead and fulfill this obligation with the congregation, namely when the communal laining is happening. That's when you can do it. In the words of Rabbeinu Yonah on that Gemara, shekodem sheyikra tzibur parsha b'beit hakneset yikra oto bebeito. Before the congregation reads it, you read it at home, either on Shabbos morning or that week, but eno lahagdim mishavu hazeh l'shnei shavuot o shlosha. You cannot make it earlier by 2 or 3 weeks. And therefore, the Shut Knei Bosem, which was written by one of the great rabbis of our generation, Rav Meir Bronsdorfer, his years 1934 to 2009, he was born in Antwerp. His grandfather was the famous Eim Abanim Smecha Rav Teichtel Hashem Yikom Damo, who wrote the manifesto, I would say, on religious Zionism. When he came to Israel, he was the Rav of the Batei Ungarin, if you know it, Meir Sharim, and ultimately in charge of the kashrus of the Eidah Haredis. He comes along and says, the imagdima kriya mishavua zeh leshavua hakodemet lo nechshav kemashlim haparsha matzibur. If you do it earlier than you're supposed to, it is not a fulfillment of this obligation. And therefore, he says, you have to do it again. So therefore, our question of the gap between Chutz La'aretz and Israel is very relevant, because you cannot do it earlier than you are allowed to. You have to do it that week or up to Shmini Atzeret B'di'evet, but you cannot do it earlier. Just to make this crystal clear, let's go to the Parsha that has this problem for the entire world every single year. We read the Parshas on a regular Shabbos. If it's a Yom Tov, we read a special Yom Tov reading. There is no obligation to read Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum for the Yom Tov reading. That's what the Shulchan Aruch paskins. In Tzarich Likrot Parshat Yom Tov, you don't have to read the Yom Tov laining, simply because the Yom Tov reading is something that we're going to read as a Parsha sometime during the year. However, there is one Parsha that we read on a Yom Tov, and that is וזאת, הברכה. We read it on Simchas Torah. So when is the time to do Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum for וזאת, הברכה? Any year, we're going to have a big gap between Ha'azinu and וזאת, הברכה. Why? Because Ha'azinu is read before Sukkot. Sukkot will at least knock out one Shabbos, because either a Shabbos Chol HaMoed or the first day of Sukkot will be Shabbos, and therefore you're going to have a big gap. So when do you start וזאת, הברכה? Mincha, we're going to start right after we finish Ha'azinu at Shachris. We find on this issue 5 different points of view, all of them surrounding the fact that it has to be on time. And the Arizal is quoted as saying, Be'erev Simchas Torah. That's the time to read וזאת, הברכה, because that's the day we're going to read it. So there's 2 ways of understanding this. The Sharei Tshuva says that the way he understands this is Erev Simchas Torah means the day before Simchas Torah, namely Hoshana Rabbah. That's what the Pri Megadim understands. That's what the Kaf HaChaim understands. That's what the Chidah understands in his Birkei Yosef, and that is what the Mishnah Bura understands of Yom Shana Rabbah Yikra Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum Parshat Vezot Habracha. They do all add that if you didn't have a chance, you can do it until Shmini Atzeret, because we're going to read it on Simchas Torah. However, the Magen Avraham understands the Ari as Erev Simchas Torah Mamish. So after Hakafos, you come home. That's the only time that you can do Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. Thank God, Zot HaBracha is pretty short. That's the way the Kaf HaChaim understands it. And indeed, the Mishnah Bura, not in Reish Pei Hei, which is the siman that deals with these issues, but in the siman about Simchas Torah, Tav Reish Samech Tet Seif Katan Dal, it says Belel Simchas Torah Yikra Parsha Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. Makes perfect sense, because that's the time we're going to read it, as the Pri Megadim summarizes Nira Tov Yoter Erev Simchas Torah. However, there are three other points of view. A little more lenient, the Kaf HaChaim says you can read it until the Tzibur read Vezot Habracha. So in the middle of Hakafos, if you want to take a break and you want to do Shtayim Mikra, that's fine, simply because they have not yet finished the Torah in your minyan. So the Piskei Tshuvos, which is a wonderful book written on the Shulchan Aruch of a Hasidish of our generation, says B'diyeved ad Sof Yom Simchas Torah. Since we read it in the morning, like a regular Shabbos, you have till the end of the day, according to some poskim. Same thing with Simchas Torah. And he brings in the name of Rav Zilber that maybe you can even start on the Sunday of that week. So let's say this year, Sukkot, first day comes out on Shabbos. That Sunday is that Shabbos. We're going to read Vezot HaBracha, at least in Israel. In Chutz La'aretz on Sunday. You can start doing V'shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum that week. Then he adds, so if that's the case, what's the cutoff point? It seems like the cutoff point is going to be, when can you start Bereshis? So the Piskei Tshuvos says in the name of Rav Zilber, Motzei Simchas Torah. That's the last time we read Vezot HaBracha from Motzei Simchas Torah. For sure, you have transitioned to Bereshis even if your kafos went all day, and therefore you can basically start then, Ukeshazman Dachuk, and when it's very close to Shabbos, like if Simchas Torah comes out Thursday, and Chutz La'aretz it can come out even on Friday, then you can start from the time your minyan started Bereshis, giving you a little more leeway. He quotes the Kshut Kinyan Torah as saying, you can start Bereshis when the Vatikan minyan started to lane it. So as you could see, when the congregation lanes it, defines for us when we can reach Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. It's not just a free-for-all whenever it's good for you. That's the case. The next podcast is going to have to deal with, so what about when there's a gap between Israel and Chutz La'aretz? I'm coming from Chutz La'aretz to Israel, or vice versa. When is my time to read Shtayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum? More about that in the next podcast.